Hey, y'all. It's BBA. That's short for Basketball by Association. My name's Arky Shea. That is Mr. Joel C. Cordes. Joel, how be you this fine basketball season?
Well, that's short for Admiral General Joel C. Cordes, but I'm doing well, and it's good to see your face again. It's good to hear your voice again. Can you believe that we are like a quarter of the way through the NBA season now? And so many things that you and I have been observing and just picking up at random as we watch different games. And I know watching the betting line and watching the box scores and all that stuff. So I'm excited to. We're literally going to compare notes today, Arky Shea. We're
Yeah.
going to get together and cram before the test, and we're going to compare notes on what we've learned and see where we're at, because it's been a season so far, and I'll name the episode for you in a second. But
Okay, sure. Well, before I get to one of the first things I've learned so far, you can get to that. But first, I wanted to say it is also nice to see you as well. We have had a little bit of scheduling issues, but now I'm straight through, son. I am all the way straight through. You cannot get a co-host to sub in for me anymore. I'm in the flesh, digitally, of course. So
all
who's
right,
this?
now all 10 of you who were listening to this, you were all witnesses. You're all witnesses.
I'm here.
Go tell 10 of your friends, and let's get 100 witnesses for this. I'd appreciate that.
I'm here. We're not doing Christmas Day, so that's good. Mm-hmm. Okay, don't have to worry about recording on Christmas Day, or Christmas Eve even, or even New Year's Day. So you got nothing but me, brother.
So this episode is 127. There's only one player in NBA history with 127 career playoff games. And as we had last week, which was the Sean Living episode, it's kind of cool when you get up to this literal upper echelon of playoff games to start to see some of the guys who you wouldn't think would be there. It's not just all stars and superstars and well-known players that get up into these, really cool accolades, but sometimes it's the role players who are in the right place at the right time. So I'm going to give you a lot of different clues on this guy, and we'll see if you can name him, but this may be a tough one, although he did play during yours and my youth/adolescence. So that should be at least a little bit of a clue. This guy was drafted in 88, 89. He was on the all-rookie team, and yet the very next year, he did not even play in the NBA. Now get that, I've never heard of that before. He was all-rookie and then chose to go overseas to Italy. He was drafted by the Boston Celtics, came back to the Celtics where he averaged his single season of double-figure scoring, then bounced around to the Miami Heat for a couple of years, is probably most well-known for being on the Shaq Magic teams, where he was for 3 seasons, then was traded, did some time, a season with the Warriors, a season with the Sixers, a season with the Blazers, and then resurfaced to play with Shaq yet again on the Los Angeles Lakers beginning in 1999, where this gentleman won 3 rings. So when you wrap your mind around the fact he played with Shaq in arguably Shaq's 2 most dominant eras, you start to understand all those career playoff games. And if that doesn't do enough for you, he was briefly, during the mid-2000s, disastrously so, the coach of the Denver Nuggets for a season and a half, and tried to come in and be one of those tough guys and just couldn't connect with the kids, including Carmelo Anthony, and he was shown the door after a season and a half. I remember that debacle well. He's currently a very well-respected NBA assistant coach.
He's an assistant coach. Missed the 90s, something like that.
Played throughout the 90s, did 14 seasons in the league.
14 seasons. When did you say he played with Shaq?
He played with Shaq during the 94 through 97 seasons before he was traded to the Golden State Warriors for Mark Price after Shaq was leaving.
Mark Price, okay. So you can't tell me who he was. First rookie, respected coach.
No, not well. He's a well-respected assistant coach.
Sorry,
but he got his stint with the Denver Nuggets for a season and a half, and based on the results and how out of touch he was with the young players, it is, I think, going to be surprising if he gets another head coaching stint. He was the one who tried to confiscate cell phones from all of his players at the time, and that did not go over well.
Did he? Well,
Dead air, by the way, is just
sorry.
it's the selling point of the show.
I'm trying to think if this guy was the rookie that year, and then that's one thing I'm just trying to. So I'm gonna throw it out there because I think I'm in the ballpark. Okay, Brian Shaw.
It's Brian Shaw. You got it.
It is Brian Shaw.
Yes.
Oh Lordy.
That's nice. That's nice.
Was,
that was worth the dead air. That was worth the dead air. Well, you got it.
So
I didn't think you were going to get that
thing
one.
Threw me off because I don't even remember the cell phone story, to be honest with you. Which, by the way, wonderful idea to do to take it away from people. That will definitely endear you to your team. How long he was the coach there for more than a minute, right? Like it was
a season and a half. He got one season and they underachieved, and then he got canned halfway through the next season because it just was not working.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, one of those guys where he had all the pedigree to be a head coach. He's a backup point guard. Those guys seem to make the best NBA head coaches for some reason. They get a lot of looks, and played with some really good coaches in the NBA, played with some really, really good players in the NBA, and has those 3 rings. He was even rumored at one point to be in the running during the really dark days for the Los Angeles Lakers. He was rumored to be in the running for head coach there too for a little bit, and then they thought better.
Okay, so that threw me off. I did not. I'm going to be honest with you. The 2 things threw me off: cell phone. Didn't even think I was trying to think of even a cell phone story, to be honest with you. And 2, did not know or even remember, maybe the back of my head, dude, that after his rookie year he went to Italy.
I did not know that either, and I did not know that he had been a Celtic and a Heat before that. To me, he was always a guy who literally just appeared on the Orlando Magic at their peak, and that was probably about the time that my real interest in the league was beginning anyway. But I don't recall seeing Brian Shaw Celtics or Heat cards, and I've got plenty of 90s cards, and I don't even think I have one from there. So I knew, to me, he started with Orlando, and I knew that he then bounced around between like 3 different teams before landing with the Lakers, and it just never registered to me that there were 5-6 years before that.
I think your clues were both helpful and distracting at the same time. So you're
mission accomplished. We got him.
We got him. We'll welcome your first dead here. All right. So Brian Shaw, let's try to do you nicely here, and let's talk about some things that we have learned. Can I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay, good. The Boston Celtics may be the best team of all time. Okay. Now, I hate saying that because, of course, my gangsta affiliation with the rival Knicks, but
who are in the play-in field, by the way, and staying afloat.
I am. Thank you. By the way, we're a game out of being guaranteed a spot. Relax, everybody. Relax. Okay, no one's mad. We're a quarter way in, but the Celtics are insane right now. As we're recording last night, they beat the Suns in Phoenix by like 200 points.
And that was as they got Chris Paul back and Torrey Craig came back.
And by the way, not a fully developed Boston Celtics roster right now either. They still are missing one big fella that could help them. So
let me ask you this. Does this take away 75% of the shine that we gave Ime Udoka before his discretions and transgressions? Because everyone was like, oh, he did such an amazing job. And now Joe Mazzulla, who was an assistant last year, steps in, and a lot of us, including myself, had concerns about a big step back for the Celtics, and they're looking even better. Remember, it took the Celtics halfway through last season before they went on a roll, and they've picked up rather nicely with that new head coach and all.
I don't think it takes away 75%. I think it probably takes away 72%, maybe. Just because I think the change in atmosphere there clearly was something that they needed. There were a couple of roster tweaks that were done on that team to sort of make them a little freer. And also, as you see, like, their defense is really good, but they're not super aggressive. Like, they can be better defensively, but they're not trying to because they're exhausted from all that work they had to do from January through the playoffs, that they're easing their way minutes-wise and time-wise back into this and effort-wise, knowing, and they're still like 21-5 or something like that.
I think you're going to see them get way more aggressive if and when they get a healthy Robert Williams back, just because of the paint patrolling ability, the switch ability, and that weak side help that he provides.
That will amp that team up to a whole nother level. So first thing I've noticed so far is that team is the class of the East and the NBA in the first quarter so far. They have been I thought they'd be really good. I did not think they'd be like running off to like Phoenix Suns, Golden State Warriors numbers we've seen for the last few years to start the season.
So you started at the top of the Eastern Conference. My first observation, and this is because I watched them beat the Clippers last night, but I've watched way more of their games than I would care to admit, even though they only have 6 wins on the season. We'll go to the bottom of the East. The Orlando Magic, I think, finally, for the first time in a while, can say they have a bright future ahead of them. There's a lot of kinks to be worked out, but I love the fact that they are going the New Orleans Pelicans route, the Memphis Grizzlies route. A lot of these teams that are starting to play big and starting to throw out 3 forwards out there, or 2 centers, basically 1 guard. And some of that has been injury related because they just got Cole Anthony back. Jalen Suggs has been out again. They do have Markelle Fultz back, although he's looked really, really rusty, and he almost cost them the game last night, hoisting up shots right at the end of regulation that he had not made a basket yet up into that point. And Paolo Banchero, it looked like, went up to Fultz and kind of chewed him out a little bit, and Fultz clapped back and then proceeded on the next possession to take another shot, which that's not great. But at the same time, I'll admit I was wrong on Banchero. I thought that he would be the second, maybe third best player out of those top 3. Now, obviously, we haven't seen Chet Holmgren because he's been hurt, but based on what we've seen from Jabari Smith in Houston, who I thought was the best fit with where he was going, Banchero is a stud and absolutely a day one, fringe all-star type of player. He's not going to get it because he's a rookie and the Magic aren't winning, but you see where they're going to go and you see what they're going to build around him. No Jonathan Isaac yet, but Ball looks like a legit NBA player now with a lot of upside. Mo Bamba looks like a guy who has at least salvaged enough of his upside that they'll probably trade him for guard help. Wendell Carter Jr. is a starter at center in this league. Chuma Okeke, who I know you like a lot, is a guy that every time he gets in does some good things for them. Franz Wagner looks legit. Suggs showed some flashes. So the backcourt is really a work in progress. But this idea of putting Wagner at the shooting guard spot, which then allows them to put in his brother, Mo Wagner, at the center, or whoever is healthy at the time, they've got some interesting ideas going on there. And Jamal Mosley, their coach, I think is going to show some things down the second half of the season as they steal some games, because they continue to play hard even when they're getting beat. There's a lot of what we like about Oklahoma City going on with Orlando now, and a lot of it just, I think, hinges on finally nailing a number 1 pick, even getting a number 1 pick, but a guy who's a legit star, not just a fringe type of star like Aaron Gordon or Nick Vucevic, and those guys were no disrespect to them. But you've got a hierarchy that you can start building in place. So I'm liking what I'm seeing there.
Obviously, this won't be breaking news when I tell it to you, but the first quarter has shown it. You alluded to them just a moment ago in what you talked about at the bottom of the conference, and mentioning another team that I'm going to bring up, the New Orleans Pelicans. And it's clear Zion Williamson is back, and he's in shape, clearly. He is motivated. He is playing hard, and he is succeeding at a high rate. And they are doing things that I don't think anybody expects them to do, maybe other than you and me. Like, we know that this is a team that we said at the beginning of the right before the year started. Hey, let's put it like, let's go get Bally New Orleans or whatever it is, Bally, and maybe pay attention to them on the NBA League Pass for a minute, just to watch them a little bit more, because we think they have a chance to be pretty sporty. And Joel, they're more than sporty. They're good.
They're sitting number 1 in the West right now, which is a little bit of a surprise, and I'll get to that in a moment. But they're doing it despite some injuries. Brandon Ingram has missed
Yep.
some time. CJ McCollum is just coming back from an injury, and he looks really rusty. He's struggled the last 3 games. I got a chance to see Zion in person a month ago, and I caught him on a bad night where he picked up some early fouls. He was in his head. He was moping. The body language was terrible. My wife, who was watching the game with me, and even she was commenting on it. She was like, man, he looks like a spoiled baby, and she was not impressed with Zion at all. We saw one nice alley-oop, and they got beat by the Blazers, who just flat out worked them.
Yeah.
And since that time, they've found something a little bit more consistent, and Zion's defense has picked up. ESPN has done an article on that recently. He's locking in to do more of the little things instead of just the flashy, high-flying things. And what do you know? You get to do the high-flying, flashy stuff when you do the little things. You get to do it even more. And Brandon Ingram is there. So I think this trajectory shouldn't necessarily be surprising us because we knew they were capable of it.
Mhm.
It's felt like they've been capable of it the last couple of years, and it's been hijacked every time by Zion's health. And now you're starting to see the length of the guys that they have. Trey Murphy's really playing well for them.
Trey Murphy's good. Trey Murphy's
been
good
moved
with
in that
the
starting
team.
lineup, and no Herb Jones, who we know is, kind of one of those budding defensive stars and really a glue guy for them. But even like Jose Alvarado, who barely made an NBA roster and then carved his way from the 4th point guard spot to the backup spot this year, drops 38 points and a double-double the other night. And you talk about like guys being locked in and hustling, and they're doing the things that I did not see from them that night against the Blazers, but the win column is finally starting to pay off.
Despite all of that, all their awfulness, they won 7 of 8. Like they like you said, they have found something. They're in a groove.
I'd like to think my appearance and disapproval was the catalyst for turning it around. You're welcome, New Orleans. You can send me a baguette or something.
Not just yours and your wife's.
Right.
You guys double dutied, literally on top of Zion Williamson and his. By the way, Zion Williamson.
Trust me, her disapproval is the one that really matters. Let's be real here. So
Zion Williamson's still a baby, like in this league, right? Like not only like wham, but like he's still young. Like he's gonna not only young age, young experience. Like it feels like he's played like 70 total games, right? Like he's still got a lot to grow into and figure out as far as his mentality is concerned. But like raw talent there, it's all there, man.
So one other team that is further along on their trajectory, because we did not give them a trajectory, I merely gave them a nice little backhanded high five at the end of the Pacific Division preview where I said, you know what? The Sacramento Kings are going to be watchable this year. Like you shouldn't feel bad or, check yourself into rehab if you're tuning into a Kings game voluntarily. Like they're going to be watchable this year, but they're stuck in a division where I just don't see how they can finish better than 5th. Well, don't look now, but the Sacramento Kings are sitting in 5th in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
And the pairing that we knew was going to butter the bread there, the De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis pairing is as good as advertised. It's as good as I hoped it would be last year. Both of those guys are really smart players. And that big little pairing still works in the NBA, especially when you have a guy like Sabonis who can score from all 5 levels, but is such a willing passer. And you have Fox who has really good vision mixed with an excellent handle, excellent speed. The 3-point shot continues to improve every year. You can tell the work is there. And he just seems like a guy who maybe in his first couple seasons was figuring it out a little bit about where he was going to get his points, but now really looks like a leader at the point guard position, a guy who understands how and when to table set everybody else and when to start taking over games. And it's that sign of maturity that's really cool to watch. But the extra special part, I think, for the Kings is that you looked at the starting 5 and you went, okay, I see what they're doing here. You got Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes at the other wings, a couple of guys who are, plus defenders, at least barely plus, but they can knock down shots from all over the floor and they're big for their positions. And this Keegan Murray kid, I mean, I don't know. The Kings have had a lot of power forwards that they've drafted over the years who just kind of flamed out and didn't fit, but Murray, maybe they're not going to ask him to do too much. And next to Sabonis and Barnes, who are both KG veterans at this point, maybe he can fit in. And he is fitting in, and he's looking really, really good when he's been healthy. There's been some stuff to figure out for sure, but as a fifth starter, they've got to be thrilled that it's the right kind of guy taken at the right type of draft slot. And now with the insulation around him where they're not asking too much, it's a sign of a team that's growing up and not going to overtax their rookies. And don't look now, but they've got a 6 man of the year candidate, Malik Monk, who's been an absolute flamethrower for them off the bench. Rashawn Holmes in that second unit, who you and I like a lot, KZ Okpala, and then Davion Mitchell, who, I mean, he's been so good at the backup point guard spot and budding that he's one of those guys where you look at him and you go, I don't know how long the Kings are going to be able to keep him as the overqualified backup behind De'Aaron Fox before some bad team comes around and tries to hand him a contract, because he's getting after it defensively, and he gives them a nice spark offensively, which is saying a lot when you've already got a spark player in Fox.
So, Joel, I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like what we need to really talk about is always the Lakers when it comes to how good or bad teams are. The Kings are fine. They're beautiful. They're wonderful. They're actually winning games. The Lakers, you know what I don't understand, Joel, as far as we start talking about some of these teams that are why they are not quite up to snuff that we think they are. And by the way, one of those I do want to talk about. I'll talk. Let me start with them. Okay, let me start with the team I want to talk about. So forget the Lakers, right? The Lakers, they're as Anthony Davis goes, right? Like whatever they are, like how much helium can you put into the balloon that is the Los Angeles Lakers? But I'm worried about one team that's still fine right now, but I think could have been better early in the season. And I think that there are some cracks in the wall here that worry me. And maybe this is why that they're sort of the bottom end of getting into the playoff guaranteed. And that's the Atlanta Hawks. And I don't think that they're particularly great.
Nope.
I think the biggest issue for me is the Nate McMillan, Trae Young thing, because I don't think everyone talks about athletes being entitled to say whatever they want kind of thing, which is fine. It's the society that we're in. We deal with it. But I don't think he's going purely out on a limb on something that's just him and his shoulder issue, that he would go out and call his coach out for that, even though his coach called him out essentially for that. And Joel, I think we're heading for a real gut check time for the Atlanta Hawks organization, and maybe with this team this year, because to me, that team should be pretty good.
Especially when Philly is not where they need to be. Toronto's not where they need to be. The Heat aren't. The Knicks are still around 500, but the Wizards and the Bulls
Thank you for mentioning the Knicks.
aren't. It's really similar to what we're seeing in the Western Conference, right? About those teams that I just talked about. Like,
yeah,
this is a time to take advantage of the fact that other teams are down, not to be as inconsistent as they are. So you're right about the Hawks, man.
I don't think they play down or up to their competition. You think that? I just think that they're a moody team, right? Like you're just there. You don't get a consistent output from them, and this is that perfect time to say, "Hey, we should be number 2 in the East, maybe number 3." And I know they're 5 now, which is fine, but they're 5.5 games back of the number 2 spot. And they have had a bunch
2
of
games of falling out of the playoffs, right? The play-in even.
That team's had a bunch of opportunities to be the team to take advantage of slow starts from teams we thought were going to be pretty good. And now they got the potential influx of infighting. I don't know. I was high on them, a couple years ago. Last year, thought they'd be pretty good. They didn't do it.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering if that was just a flash in the pan.
And that this is part of their DNA of being inconsistent, right?
Okay. I thought you were going to say being Atlanta, but that's fine. You almost went there. I think this is. I don't think this is a coach situation. I don't think it's a player situation. I think it's an everybody situation. This team, just outside of that magical run last year, sort of at the end of the year and into the playoffs, they just have not shown any piece of being able to put together.
Yeah, and that run is 2 years ago already. Last year was where they got their teeth kicked in by the Heat. But yeah, 2 years ago, even when they made that run, there was the story that just wouldn't go away about John Collins and Trae Young not liking each other and not getting along. And Young was going to be gone, or Collins was going to be gone, and they still never found a taker for him after they gave him that max contract. And you're right, it seems like a team with more talent than production, and certainly more than consistency. And they've tried to shuffle the deck a little bit. And DeJounte Murray was supposed to be the cure-all in that backcourt. And yeah, the numbers have looked good and the chemistry's been okay, but the inconsistency and the problems persist. And they got Murray for a steal. So I think we're at that point, and I'm going to tie this in on something that I'm concerned about on the other side of the conference with a similar team and a similar guy who will be forever tied to Trae Young, and that's Luka Doncic. Like, we are at the point in these guys' careers now where it's not just, oh, they're really flashy and they make the highlights and think about how good they're going to be in a couple years. Like, the couple years are now. We're here. And it's time for these superstar players, especially in the case of Luka, who I think probably he's got a better team around him this year than he did last year, in the last couple years. I don't know if he's got more or less help than Atlanta. That's hard to say. But it's time. Like, Trae Young's not an MVP candidate. Trae Young's an all-star candidate. Luka is an MVP candidate who was supposed to be the front runner. And I don't know, despite the fact that, yes, he leads the league in scoring, he leads his league in assists and rebounds as well. There's all sorts of stats and reasons to love Luka. I don't know how you could possibly hand him the MVP right now when his team is sitting 2 games above 500 and in the play-in field and not moving the needle, which is why Jason Kidd was brought in to replace a very good coach in Rick Carlisle. And the Mavs did look better last year for a bit, but this is kind of the thing that's happened to Kidd in his 2 previous stops. They looked better when he first got there, and he was able to make some initial changes, and then it was descending back into the type of mediocrity that got Kidd hired in the first place to try to fix. I'm a little bit worried about that because I watched the Mavericks, and yeah, they look so good on certain possessions, and their defense has looked better. I saw them really just take it to the Phoenix Suns a couple games ago in Dallas. Granted, Phoenix was without, Chris Paul and no Torrey Craig and what have you, but the Mavs locked up Devin Booker. They held him to 11 points in that game. They let DeAndre Ayton get his, but nobody else get anything. And Dallas looked really, really good. And then they turn around and they drop games they got no business doing. So like Atlanta, to me, the mirror image of that on the other side is Dallas. These are teams that, because of the superstar level player that they have as their lead guy and the supporting cast, there's no excuse for them to be sitting like right around the play-in field. None, especially when you've got, like we've just said, these teams that were supposed to be better, were supposed to be front runners, have not figured it out yet. There's no reason for these, for the Hawks and the Mavs to be sitting down just as inconsistent as they are right around 500. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about them. You keep wanting to buy in that Luka stock, and it's a great individual stock to have, but as far as like a team commodity, it's just you don't trust it, right? You can't at this point. Let me go ahead. You're about to say.
Well, I was just going to ask you. Luka to me is top 5 in MVP because he's scoring so much.
Sure.
But he's not a front runner until they start to win some games. To me, it's Giannis way out front. Jason Tatum in the mix because of the way he's scoring, the way that his game continues to develop, and the fact that his team's got the best record in the NBA. And then other as my third choice. And I was just going to ask you, like, if you have to pick that MVP today, who are you giving it to? Is it other, or you're going Giannis like I would? It's tough not to get Jason Tatum some love here, but Giannis is just doing everything.
So here is why I try not to be the prisoner of the moment, right? Because I'm tempted to not completely respect Giannis just because Tatum is flashy and new.
Mhm.
And listen, they're the best record in the NBA. It's the best team in the NBA right now. They're just starting this road trip where they start out and they busted up a pretty good Phoenix Suns team by a lot of points than the most recent game. And Jason Tatum didn't even have to play the fourth quarter of that game. That's how much of a blowout it was.
Mhm.
I think Giannis is the safe bet right now because of how multiple he is onto the court and how defensively he is just a dog, man. He just grinds. You don't think somebody's playing that much defense the first quarter of the season, but he's got spunk in those legs, man.
And him out in the open court, like, it gets scarier and scarier every year. And it was already like peak level terrifying the last couple seasons, and it's even worse now when he's out in transition because he's added a few little nuance moves and a couple little dribble packages to that super long stride he has. He keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. I mean, he's in full like David Robinson rip territory now, which he has been for a couple seasons, and the game has slowed down to him. I mean, he's playing with his food when he's out there.
Yeah, that's a good. You know what? That's a good analogy. He is so vastly superior right now
Mhm.
that like it doesn't have to just be, hey, guess what? I gotta prove something to you. It's just naturally gifted there, and he's kind of like playing with the food, but also like he's got, you can tell there's a confidence about his game that everything seems to work, and he knows how to sort of play with that. I'd show a little love to Kevin Durant too. This Brooklyn team's not supposed to be nearly in the spot I think it is in right now, being able to host in the playoffs at this point. But
Mhm.
he's still a little far down the list. He's averaging like 28 a game or something like that, so he's still killing it. How about Shea Gilgeous Alexander, huh? Huh? That guy. Okay, maybe not for the MVP for a team that's won like 6
No.
games, but I would say Giannis just because he's so good. But Tatum's close. But I think Tatum for me, because he's exploding this year, sort of gets like the new fresh vote vibe. But like he's it's tough.
Mhm.
Okay, the best player in the NBA is Giannis. He's the best player in the NBA, top to bottom.
Yeah.
But as far as MVP year having right now, Tatum is close. Tatum is close to that. So that could be a winnable conversation.
And the fact that the Celtics have a better record than the Bucks and what
Sure. And
have you.
he's the huge reason why. Like he is absolutely firecrackered his way out of the season.
For sure. You got another lesson you want to give here? Otherwise, I got one or two more.
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised, and maybe I should not have been. But your team,
Hmm.
the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
I don't want to call you out, right? So I'm not going to. But I am curious, so I will try to pose it in a very friendly way. What's up? They're not bad. They're not
No,
bad. They're just another
they're not
inconsistent team.
good. So yeah, we Dan Lewig and I on the previous episode of Basketball by Association, we dedicated the episode to kind of breaking down where they were at that 20 game point or so, which is a good hallmark of the Rudy Gobert experiment. So if you want the truly detailed stuff of that, listener, go back and listen to that episode. But the long and short is that the Gobert Karl Anthony Towns pairing before Towns got hurt was workable. There was a lot of good stuff to like there. The problem has been that the pairing with everybody else has been worse than advertised, and it has thrown some guys into a funk. And there's been a lot of inconsistency and immaturity. There's been something missing in the locker room. I don't know if it's Patrick Beverley. I don't know if it's just the dynamic. Rudy Gobert did not get along very well with Donovan Mitchell in Utah and was a guy that people kind of rolled their eyes about a little bit. And I can see why. I've seen that happen already in 20 games here in Minnesota. Something as simple as last night in their win, which is a nice inspired win. Thank you, Anthony Davis, over the Indiana Pacers. Rudy Gobert goes in, dunks the ball, falls on his back, thought he got fouled, laid on his back and pouted as the Pacers went the other way and played 5-on-4 against Minnesota and scored, and Gobert literally never got back in the play. Like, and he got yanked out of the game on the next possession after that. So there's been some of that, and there's been some allusions to different things about spacing issues, and D'Angelo Russell's not having a good season, even though he was supposed to be the guy that really was going to pair extra well right off the bat with Gobert because of the pick and roll stuff. Anthony Edwards, it's a little bit inspiring and damning that his best couple of games here have come when Towns has been hurt. And all of a sudden, Edwards is flying all over the place, looking like a defensive player of the year candidate. I mean, racking up 5-6 blocks in a game a couple of times now and locking people up. Like Minnesota they really took it to the Memphis Grizzlies in Minnesota, which was like 3 games ago. But then they go out and they lose one where they had 5 technicals in a game and they completely self-destruct against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And Anthony Edwards was all over the map against the Grizzlies, flakes out against OKC, has a really nice game against Indiana, who's a very good team, and I'd like to talk about in a second. And they're just up and down, man. There's something not working there. And to me, the takeaway is that as of right now, the Rudy Gobert trade was not worth it. Not for the pieces you gave up when you know Jared Vanderbilt was usable. Beverly had a role. Some of the other younger guys had roles that fit. It has not been worth it to be sitting now just out of the play-in tournament, to be slightly above where you were defensive in points given up rankings wise, but not actually ahead in the amount of points given up. It's just the math has changed in the league. It's not worth it. But then on the flip side, you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers with Donovan Mitchell, and they gave up slightly less in the grand scheme of things than what the Wolves did to get Gobert. And for the Cavs, it's been absolutely worth it. They're 16-9. They're sitting in 3rd place. They've fought through some Darius Garland injuries. They've missed Jared Allen a couple of games. They've had other guys who've been in and out of the lineup, and it works. The chemistry works, but that was a more conventional idea of like, let's put 2 really good combo guards together who have played point guard before and can play shooting guard, and we've got the other pieces, versus let's take 2 centers, one of whom can't shoot and is an old school previous gen center, and let's stick the 2 of them together and see how that works. But again, we're a quarter of the way through the season.
Look at you saying gen instead of generation. Look at you. You're cool. You know that?
Do it for the youths.
You do it for the youths. I'll let you wrap it up. Who you got next?
Well,
or what or whom is either disappointing or maybe let's get disappointing. Yeah.
I just want to give a shout out to the Indiana Pacers, a team that they were the team this year who every single year that we do kind of team previews, there's always the one team where we're like, and we're not going to talk about them more than just, a few seconds. And they were that team this year.
That's true.
And I thought that Ben Mathurin could be an NBA player. I didn't think that he was going to be an impact player for them. I saw a roster like Utah that was just kind of loaded with some NBA players, but guys that were in transition and clearly would want to be out of there. Miles Turner, of course, comes front of mind. And yet, all of a sudden, not only is Tyrese Halliburton leading the league in assists, which we thought, maybe that might be possible last year. We saw some big flashes out of him once he arrived in Indiana. But he's a legit all-star. Absolute legit all-star, multi-time all-star, so much better than I gave him credit for in Sacramento, where I thought he had peaked already his rookie season. And they've got shooters around him and Buddy Hield and Andrew Nembhard. Chris Duarte, who's been hurt, now gets to be like the 4th best guard in that rotation instead of the starting backcourt, who I still thought Duarte could work with Halliburton because he was lanky, he's athletic, he can knock down a 3. But Ben Mathurin, who is the 6th man at this point, looks like the future next to Halliburton and is the rich man's version of what Chris Duarte was giving them last year. And you go, this backcourt could be killer, to the point that Buddy Hield, who's been nice to have and has been a guy who's certainly helping them win games, they don't need him in the long-term plan. They can move him and potentially Miles Turner if they want to get more front court help. But even Miles Turner, who was not so subtly like trying to talk his way out of Indianapolis, all of a sudden really, really fits nicely there with those guys as a shot blocker and a 5 who can stretch the floor. And yeah, he's not a great rebounder, but they're so big at their guard positions and they're rugged. Like all of those guys, except for Buddy Hield, are rugged guards. And they're getting some yeoman's work out of Jalen Smith and O'Shea Brissett, who I'm not sure if either of those guys are legit starters in the NBA at power forward, but in a timeshare, and along with Isaiah Jackson in that mix, like they've been passable. They're not embarrassing themselves. They're playing good defense. They're getting some rebounds and they're finishing plays. Like they're playing within themselves. And Rick Carlisle has them playing at the second fastest pace in the league, which really fits in nicely with what that team does. I thought they were going to be such an afterthought. But out of all of the teams, and again, as soon as I say this, I'm going to jinx them, and I'm sorry, Pacers fans, but out of all the teams that jumped out early, Portland, Utah, San Antonio, even Sacramento, I think out of that group, Indiana is the one that I see with the staying power to for sure be a play-in team in the East, although I know there's a couple of good ones in there that we just talked about and mentioned that are probably going to be better as time goes on. Indiana could wind up being a 6 seed. Like, I do think that as so much is going to go as Halliburton goes, and we know that Mathurin will hit the rookie wall at some point here, but I do see this as sustainable, and I'm really glad and surprised that I was so wrong about the Pacers.
I appreciate you saying that about Indiana. I don't think it's as sustainable as you think it is. Again, like I said, it's a quarter of the way of the season. It's not like they're 21-3 going through. Like they're just win a couple here, lose a couple here, win a couple. They are better than we thought. They definitely are better than we thought so far this season. Ben Mathurin's gonna hit that wall, and I think what can help them through that wall is the style of play that they're going to be playing. So I think because of that pacing, he probably will be able to get through it sooner, and I think that helps his game.
And that their guard rotation is 6 deep. Their guard rotation is 6 deep. Like, I didn't mention TJ McConnell in there, and I didn't mention Aaron Nesmith, who's given them good minutes. Like, so you're right. I think they can insulate for Mathurin in the fact that if he's really having an off night or needs 2 games off to try to get those rookie legs back, this is a team that's actually equipped to maybe do that for him, you know?
All right. I got like 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you this question, and you help me out with it. What do I make? What am I supposed to make of this Miami Heat team this year?
This is a team that I don't expect to turn it around unless they are able to make some really savvy moves at the deadline. We were a little bit concerned with the erosion of their bench and the fact that Tyler Hero would have to step up into the shooting guard spot as a starter. Those have come to fruition, especially as Jimmy Butler has missed major time. But even when he's been there, yeah, they're a tough team. You don't really want to play Miami on any given night, but this looks like a team that's right about where they're at, which is 500, maybe a little bit better.
Yeah.
Granted, they're usually a very active team at the deadline. They do get guys, especially in the second half of seasons, that they kind of unearth out of the G League or who had been sitting the bench and suddenly, with good coaching, are able to jump in. We've got Gabe Vincent, we've got Victor Oladipo, we've got Duncan Robinson, we've got Max Strus. All of those guys in that second unit have some upside to play better than they've played up to this point. But we've yet to see that. And I do think a team like Philadelphia, a team like Atlanta are much better equipped in the Eastern Conference to get it together and get rolling. You know, Toronto just has to get healthy. They've been staying afloat. I could even see New York, and this is not just me, New York or Washington. I could see either of those teams getting hot, you know, and winning 6 out of 8, 7 out of 8, and putting a little bit of breathing room. I just don't see that spark from the Miami Heat this year to be able to do more than, you know, win two or three games here or there before they drop 1 or 2 or 3 games.
And here's the thing. I think they're still formidable and dangerous as a matchup if they're able to make it to a playoff. But yeah, as far as being able to sustain a high seed, probably to get into the playoffs themselves again this year, I think we're a year past that. I think last year, even to the year before that, were good examples of them taking advantage. As you mentioned, some teams that did not take advantage. They did take advantage of some of the injuries and slow starts from teams last year. This year, either they're playing possum, which is not completely impossible to think considering some of the age on that team.
Impossible, you mean?
Joel, brother.
I mean, you said it.
Thank you. But yeah, I think this is going to be more of a matchup when they get to the playoff. If they get to the playoff, kind of dangerous team. I think.
No, I agree.
I think they can be. It just will be whom they put up to. And again, you can spend a lot of time just going back and forth trying to rest because these guys have. There's a lot of old legs on this team.
They feel like a play-in tournament team this year, but one that, yeah, when they get into that, especially in one-game scenarios, and they face some younger teams who maybe haven't been together before, like in Indiana. Maybe they see Atlanta again. Maybe Washington gets back up in there. Like they would be dangerous in that scenario, and they could be dangerous in the first round as a 6-3 seed or a 7-4 or whatever, but or 7-2, I should say. But I don't see a real ceiling for them this year.
Well, maybe we're standing on the ceiling right now. Yeah, we might be there. All right, Joel, let's go do it for us for Basketball by Association. Joel, thank you for your basketballness.
Thank you for your association, and thank you, listener, for checking us out. The Brian Shaw episode is in the books. If you want the video version, check us out on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, do all the good things over there. If you want audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes is where you get this here show.